I was really excited when we passed that resolution at the assembly, and did want to put my name forward as possible for the committee, because I really feel like I'm going to be there in the future, and I'd like to be part of us figuring out where we're going in the future. I had a real sense that we as a community knew that things were going to be changing pretty dramatically, and that we were going to need to look at a future that was pretty different than what we had today. And for me, that held a lot of possibilities that I wanted to help the community explore. I know that it's sort of scary when something is ending, but it was so clear to me that something new was also just beyond the horizon. So that was my main reason for wanting to be on the discernment committee. I mean, like a lot of people in Loretto, I had used the word discernment infrequently prior to that assembly. So I was eager to learn about what we would do differently, and how we could do it together. Well, I think it has done, some of what we hoped for. I feel like, we've done some good work. We don't have any outcomes. I think for many of us, at least in my mind, we were going to learn sort of discernment practices, and then we were going to move to some more practical things. When I got on the discernment committee, I had to really set aside the part of me that tends to be a high J and say, keep it open, let go, whatever. So I think we did some good work. I think more people are capable of that deeper listening, at least temporarily, and then to participate in some things that are very different. The thing that's hard for me is that, like, my community group is really about relationships and doing the work. Other community groups are very task oriented. It's like, how quickly can we get through this agenda? And that makes it hard, I think, to introduce discernment, to try to ask for a process that takes more time, more quiet space. And so I think if we could, if it was tied to something in particular that was on the agenda, so that we could say, now here's an issue, and we really want to, again, just keep our discernment skills honed, we could put some things in that describe the process and remind people the point isn't to see how quickly you can get through. The point is we're all listening. We're not preparing our next statement while someone else is speaking. We're trying to really be open and suspend judgment. We're trying to come in saying, I don't have all the information and I don't have an outcome already decided before I hear the conversation. I mean, those kinds of things, if there was an agenda item that it could be attached to, I think it would be useful. Well, I think that because Loretto is such a sort of person-centered entity, from the beginning, we knew that discernment was a process for the whole community, not for some select group. And that meant really trying to figure out how do we bring people in who are coming from a variety of different starting points. I think Loretto is very good at recognizing that it's both a community and an organization, and trying to maintain that balance so we don't become too organizational and lose the community, but so we don't forget that, in fact, the community is also an organization that has responsibilities and things that it has to do. So that, I think that made our process different than what I've heard about that some other communities did. very reflective of what I think are Loretto values. The thing that became pretty clear to me was that what was going to facilitate that was our own willingness to let go of some of what was in the present. And it meant letting go without knowing what was next. And that's a hard thing. It's much easier, you know, to like transform, you know, myself or the community if we know we're going to stop doing this and start doing that. And what we realized in this process was that there was going to be this gap, that we would have to let go and then just sit there in the gap until we figured out what was coming and what was going to be next. So that was one of the things that was necessary, and I think some of us have gotten better at it over time. The other thing that I saw that was really amazing is that among some of the older people in the community, I found sisters saying, you know what, I trust you all to do whatever needs to be done. My life is going to pretty much stay the way it is until I die, but go with my blessing and do whatever you need to do, you know, for the future. And that was pretty exciting for people to feel safe and secure enough for themselves and to say, you know, go and do that. I think I have my own ideas and then things I've heard people say. I mean, I don't know what the community will decide, but for me, I see a lot of really exciting possibilities. I see Loretto having a wider view or a wider vision than a lot of the more traditional Catholic communities. So I see us as trying to create something that is, you know, faith-based and spiritually based, but not Roman Catholic. When we think about collaboration, I think we look at a wide range of possibilities, not just other Catholic institutions. And so it opens up a lot of possibilities. I don't see Loretto undertaking some big new project on its own. Everything that I think about is collaborative in some way. But I think there are many possibilities. I think we are going to have to choose. Sometimes Loretto doesn't like to choose. It likes to try to do a little of everything. And I think that's going to be harder. And it would be good for us to choose and focus some of our energy and efforts. And for me, having a new civil entity that can do some of this work is very exciting. I see that entity as the place where things like the volunteer program, the UN NGO, Cedars of Peace can continue forward into the future while the congregation, you know, sort of diminishes. And that's good for me. But there'll also be some new things that will open up, I think, in that space. For me, the good news is that Loretto is in a position to take care of every sister until she's gone and still have money left to make some choices about what sort of mission work do we want to do and how do we want to maintain community, because I think we need both. I mean, I think community is the mission, so we need to support and encourage community, but then we need to make sure that community continues to look outward as well as, you know, within the community. And so I think there are going to be some real opportunities for us to make some choices. And I think we have enough, not enough to do everything on our own, but as I said, we are going to be collaborative. And so I think we'll bring something to the table, some other folks will, and we'll have the resources we need to make some great things happen. I would say we're on the verge of transformational change. I haven't seen it yet. I think we're sort of, you know, knowing that it needs to happen, wanting to do it, but sort of trying to figure out, do we really need to do it right now, or could we wait a couple of years? And part of the reason for that, for me, is that I think many of us are trying to do two very different tasks. I think the discernment committee talked about this one time in a community process. It's that work of both hospicing and midwifing.
Yeah.
I think lots of us are so engaged in the present moment, caring about the people in the community that we love who are aging, looking at the losses that are real, you know, in terms of people dying and leaving, and then trying to also figure out where do we get the time and the energy to be that midwife who's going to bring this transformational change about. And you know, we all face very real limits in terms of how many hours in a day and how much energy we have. So it's tough because we are person-centered. It's like in my job, oftentimes people come to my office and they have a question that takes 2 minutes, but they're in my office for 30 minutes because what they really need is to be out of the infirmary. They need to be talking to somebody. And I feel like as a member of the community, that is part of what I want to do, is to be present to them. And so there's all those kinds of things that we're all trying to do. And so there's that tension. I think there are some tasks that will be divvied up, you know, and so for instance, I feel like, you know, some part of my time is going to be spent being the treasurer for the congregation. And so that limits how much I can sort of do some of that midwifing work. But I think there are things I can do and want to do because I very much want to be part of what is coming and being built. I think all of us struggle with who do we need to be present to today? I mean, sometimes we don't know. But when somebody you care about deeply is sick or dying, it's like, okay, we got one shot, now is the time, and you make the time. And so I'm hoping that as we actually make some decisions, that there will be some people identified to do certain tasks and keep coming back to the community, because we can't all do everything, and we're not all qualified to do everything. So I think once we get some decisions made, some of that can happen with some smaller groups of people taking next steps and moving things forward. I have. There have been some conversations in Louisville and in this area with some other folks about some things we might do. And so I think there are possibilities. I mean, my experience living in St. Louis was, you know, there were lots of religious communities and there were always ways of collaborating. I mean, St. Louis has a long history of collaborative projects with communities. And so you've got Marion Middle School and you had Pillar Place and, you know, all sorts of things. But there's not so much of it here, and having, you know, 40 miles between us and Louisville it's a factor. It's not, doesn't prevent things, but it just makes it a little more complicated. But I think there are some possibilities. I also think there are possibilities with some other denominations that are here that share some of our values and do some of the work we do that are possible. You know, the Motherhouse Shared Future has done a good bit of work in terms of looking at a new small residential unit nursing home facility, which is more like home, where people live in a building with 9 or 10 other people. It's a really lovely development in skilled care, so that it's much more home-like and less institutional. I think there could be a real possibility that we could partner with somebody who's a faith-based group that has other nursing homes in Kentucky, but nothing in this area, and build something, you know, on some discrete part of the Motherhouse property, not something that's connected to every building we own, but some discrete place that could then go forward in the future, provide that quality care that we're used to providing, continue the employment that we do provide here in Marion County, which I think is really significant, you know, and have a place where Loretto folks can go. You know, they'll be with other people, but right here in a place where they're familiar. So that's one thing. I think we're also looking at sort of senior housing, which would be used by Loretto as needed and then filled with other people as space was available. That would be a partnership with some other group as well. And so I think there are a number of things. I would hope, I know that we've looked at a few things very tentatively about the farm and, you know, sort of waiting to sort of work with Farm and Land Committee more, because I see great potential for some things around the farm that really are much more mission for me. I mean, I love the fact that we have this continuously operating farm for a long, long time, but it's really hard for me to say that raising soybeans, you know, silage corn and cattle is mission. When I think about mission, I think what is Loretto uniquely positioned to do that other people either won't do or can't do? And what we do on the farm is not that. I love Cody Rakes. I think he's doing an excellent job, but I think Loretto needs to develop a much different vision of how to make the farm more of a mission work and not just an operating farm in Kentucky. I'll tell you, there's a place, I think it's in Holland, but I'm not exactly sure. It is like a 30-acre community that is, you know, sort of fenced in with trees and stuff, but there are able-bodied and people who need skilled care, including Alzheimer's and dementia people, who are all living in this community, and there are no locked doors. Staff are trained and located in various places. It is so wonderful. So people can go into a store. Everybody in the store knows certain people have issues and they're trained to deal with them. People can walk through this little village that's laid out. They can walk in the garden. They can walk in the orchard. It's 30 acres, and it's such an amazing model. One of the things that I think about is that, like, when I was in Haiti and I served on the board of this bank for the organized poor in Haiti from its inception. And we had what was called, you know, a triple bottom line consideration. So it had to be financially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and socially sustainable. So it wasn't enough just to, you know, cover your expenses. It wasn't enough to do good work. You had to do good work. They had to care about the environment and be financially stable all at the same time. And one of my key roles on the board for 10 years was to make sure that people didn't take the social and environmental considerations and put those way down below the financial. I mean, we had people with banking backgrounds who'd say, well, why don't we just focus on making money and then we'll use the money to do some social programs and some environmental programs. It's like, no, that's not who we are. And I think Loretto is the same way. I mean, I think we have sort of this triple bottom line that we define as resources, community, and mission. And so I think the community has to be both financially viable, socially responsible, and environmentally committed to really care for the earth. I think that both our mission and our resources also have to look at those same things. It's not enough that we do good mission work, but we have to do mission work that also recognizes the great needs of the planet and our ability and our own commitment to care for the earth, so that we're looking at how do we do it responsibly. Like, you know, right now the Motherhouse is looking at updating some of the heating systems. And, you know, I think it's irresponsible of us not to look at solar, geothermal, and some other things. To make an investment at this point in 20 or 30 years more of a heating system that uses fossil fuels is not who we say we are. So, you know, I hope we don't do that. Well, so for me, financial viability means that we're living up to our commitment to care for each sister until she dies. And to do that in a way that leaves as much money as possible available to do other mission work. I mean, nobody joined Loretto just to be taken care of. Joined Loretto because they cared about doing the work of the gospel, and they believed that they could do it better in a context of community. So we want to do that and still keep as many resources available for mission as possible. To me, it's not an either or. And so I think that's the challenge. And I think we're doing some big steps. I think closing the centers is going to get rid of a lot of underutilized space and allow us to free up some funds that no longer have to take care of buildings. I mean, we've always owned buildings only as a means to, serve community and mission. And so when they serve neither, it's time for them to go. And I don't mean that in a callous, uncaring way, but I really do think we're much more about community and mission than we are about owning property. So property needs to be at the service of mission and community. And I think we're doing that. I think that, we're divesting of our fossil fuel stocks. We're looking at a variety of other things that we can invest in. I'm going to some, webinars and workshops trying to figure out what else is out there that we can do. I think all of the money that we've lent out, through the investment committee, all those alternative loans that have really supported mission activities that we hold dear, when we make those loans at 0% or 1%, we are putting money where our values are. Well, I don't see the need to continue the investment committee to do the shareholder actions, because I don't see anybody stepping up to really do that in a way that's really ongoing and effective. I think it's very important that we continue the work of the alternative investments. And I think a group can continue to do that. Right now, the former investment committee members are continuing to do that when loan requests come in. And I'm really hoping that when the executive committee or whoever meets, that they will look at, how we want to make that continue, so that the people who have some expertise can evaluate loan applications. It's very different than like special needs where we're giving the money away. We have a responsibility to make sure those loans are going to get paid back. I think it's really hard to give away money with one hand and lend it out with the other. So I think they need to be different groups of people. Loretto has long tried to look at ways to protect the principal and sacrifice earnings in order to do things that are more in line with our values. So we have, we've invested in like community credit unions and other places, and we'll put like $100,000 there and say, you don't have to pay us much interest, just so that money goes to work in the community. So we make those loans, we make those investments. We try to do, the alternative investments in some companies that are more in line with our values. I think as an organization, we can't be pure. I mean, there's no bank that I could figure out how to put our money in that's 100 times better than some of the other banks. So we're not, you can't live in this country and participate in this economy and be pure. So we have to continue to try what we can. I mean, the thing for me, like with the slow money movement that was so exciting was that you know, people could gather together in a state and do what they wanted to do right in their own, you know, 50-mile radius. And that's what's exciting. I mean, I wish more people in Loretto would initiate some of that in the states where they are. That's not something that needs to be some nationwide big movement. There's a lot of rules and regulations that you avoid if you don't cross state lines. And so I'd like to see us really providing some leadership, you know, and initiative in those kinds of areas so that we could do that. At the Motherhouse, I have 100 things I'd like to see us do, which includes buying much more of our food from CSAs or local farmers than from the big food companies. I'd like to see us buying really ecological cleaning products and things like that instead of, but all of that takes money. A lot of those alternatives are more expensive, and it means the community has to commit to that being a worthwhile expenditure because it's who we say we are. So I'm really hoping some of those things will come along in the very near future. We sort of keep putting them out there, and I think, you know, like for Maria, it's really hard. She is so talented at care of people. And there's so many people here in need of care. It's hard for Maria to get beyond the current demands of the service coordinator and the needs of the people to get to some of this other stuff. And but I'm hoping it can happen. And I'm hoping it can happen in the individual houses where we live. I'm hoping that it can happen in places where we have influence. You know, there are conferences and stuff that I go to if I'm on the board and I say, you know, no styrofoam, no plastic products, you know, we can make this work. And so we have to continue to do some of that, I think. So, like, I was really excited when the Discernment Committee, as one of its steps in the process, encouraged people to do like a spiritual biography. I thought that had some real potential for us to really connect with the spiritual dimension. Unfortunately, from my opinion, we did what is sort of a typical Loretto thing. We handed it out to everybody, we checked it off the list, and then we moved on. And I think we missed a real opportunity to have people really spend some time and then share it with one another, because it's not something we're used to doing. So you wouldn't go to somebody and say, hey, you want to be part of my group and share your spiritual autobiography next week? And I think if we would have facilitated it a little more, it would have been helpful. Because I think when we do that, when we look at our spiritual journey, we find what we need in terms of the experiences and the strengths to do what we need to do going into the future. I really do believe that. I think when we do that spiritual autobiography work, we find experiences that are similar to what we're facing now, and we find that inner strength that says, oh, I can get through this too. And it's a reminder for us that this isn't so vastly different than what we've done before. Well, I wish I had a better sense of how to do it. You know, in almost every place that I've lived, I've always volunteered at like soup kitchens and different things. And when I was in DC, I volunteered at a place and I got to know this homeless woman. And I used to invite her over to my apartment, and we'd have these great conversations. And you know, one time she asked me, how come I got the vow of poverty and she got the poverty? Mm-hmm. And I've never forgotten that. I mean, I looked so privileged and so blessed and had so much. And, you know, she was living poverty. And I explained to people, we don't really aspire to poverty. It's a misnomer. But I also know here at the Motherhouse, most of our employees, most of the people in this neighborhood think of us as the rich sisters on the hill. Because if we need a new car, we go out and buy it. And we don't make car payments. And if we need something done, we get it done. And our reality is so different. I wish there was a way that we could engage with people who really are diverse from us in terms of economics, in terms of education, and have those conversations, because I think it would be really useful. I mean, I think just in terms of some people around here thinking about co-membership, it's hard for them to think that they can be co-members in this community where everybody is highly educated and everybody's this and everybody's that, but everybody's not really that, but it can appear that way. I wish I had more answers and questions. I hope what it'll look like is, you know, people who are Sisters of Loretto, people who are co-members, and then people who choose to join us in whatever is new and exciting that resonates with their values. I hope it's faith-based. I don't want to lose that dimension of who we are. And so, you know, I hope it's a more balanced segment of the population based on age, that there are more younger people, so that we really can look at some different mission activities that we can do ourselves. I love the fact that the volunteer program provides sort of the hands and feet to do the work many of our sisters would do if they weren't the age they were. But I'm really hopeful that if we do something exciting, people will be attracted to it. One thing that I think really has come out of the discernment process that I'm really grateful for is that I think there's a real commitment to stay together in terms of whatever we do to create the new. I'm really grateful for that we're looking at ways of doing things differently that allow people options, but don't make people feel cut off or sort of set aside. And I think we have the ability to witness right now in this world to how do we come together with really differing opinions and find some common ground when it isn't easy. And the world could use a lot more of that.